Welcome to the Prophecy Club. Our topic today is you're running out of time, massive arrests, and China and how China is infiltrating us. First of all, massive arrests. And by the way, if you have not called 800-200-GOLD, and if you have your money in paper, and I think you'd call that stock market and maybe some other things, especially an IRA or 401k, you may be in danger of losing it, as we are, in my opinion, a short hop, skip, and a jump away from the dollar falling. Okay, so I pulled this off of, and I feel like I almost have to wash my mouth out with soap saying CNN. I feel like I probably need to repent going to CNN, but sadly, compared to the other Christian stations, Christian news, a lot of times they have it ahead of time. But anytime you go to the Communist News Network, which is what I call them, you gotta be careful because they lie like a dog. However, the point that I want to make here is Congress has now certified Trump's 2024 election win. That's good news. So I went there to see this because it wasn't over on Newsmax or some of the other places. And there on the same page, it had another article I thought was very important. So it says, Raskin and Thompson privately reflected on election certification, a very tough pill to swallow. And of course, we Christians, we Republicans are rejoicing over Trump winning. And so every once in a while, we just have to stop and sort of rejoice a little bit that we finally got a guy that's on our side in. But in this article, it had this. It's a sorrowful sign of the times that people have to be afraid simply for doing their jobs. Raskin shared, we acted on the January 6th committee under our constitutional oaths of office as legislators. I hope and trust that we're protected by the speech and debate clause. What's he saying? He's saying both of these guys are afraid they're about to be arrested. Now, you can pass that over if you want to, or if you're looking for possible evidence that confirms that, yes, massive arrests are on the way, that's more conclusion. And then, of course, Hal Turner Radio Show.com had on his program here in the last week how hundreds of top officials, starting with Obama, have been fleeing America. Why would they do that? Because they know they got caught with their hand in the cookie jar, and they're afraid the cookie monster is coming to collect. Okay, let's go on. Benjamin Fulford, this is only part of his article. Let me just say, I don't necessarily agree with everything he says. He says some things that I flat disagree with, and I would never say some of the things he says. But anyway, headline this particular week, U.S. Civil War about to end, war with China about to begin. So part of that is we want to talk about is a war with China. So he says, have you ever wondered who's pulling the strings? Yes, it's called Moloch and Baal. The video asks, you'll find us in the shadows of the tip of the spear. Anything we touch is a weapon, talking about Moloch and Baal. We can deceive, persuade, change, influence, inspire. We come in many forms. We are everywhere, and I agree. I think that's a very good way to say who they are. They're also visibly taken down KM or Khazarian Mafia, that's what he calls Moloch and Baal worshippers, take down KM stooges. Canada's widely despised Justin Trudeau, that's what he calls him, is expected to announce resignation today, and he did in fact announce it. In Austria, now here's my point, it's not just one nation that is seeing people resign. Why are some resigning? Why are some saying that they're hiding in the shadows? I think that they're trying to avoid justice. I'll say it that way. In Austria, KM puppet Chancellor Karl Nehammer has resigned. Also, big KM honcho, the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, is facing charges in a Belgian court today related to corruption when procuring, and I can't say that word, over 35 billion in euro. On the same day, she announced she has pneumonia and will not appear in public for 2 weeks. Now, obviously, he's saying she's running. She's trying to keep from getting in trouble. She's running from justice. Then the next line says, has the military alliance taken the witch in for questioning, or has she been arrested for her evil deeds? The illness is a political spin. Notice no details are given. So he's claiming that these people are running. He didn't directly say that, but indirectly that's exactly what he's saying. As we reported previously, governments are also expected to fall in Germany, France, Japan, Korea, and elsewhere. Now, what's he saying? Governments fall. Well, just like our government is about to fall on January 20th, and a new government is about to come in. Hopefully, it's a peaceful transition, but there's about to be a whole bunch of big changes around the globe. And I do think they're good, but I do think that they are temporary, brief. I want to think 3 or 4 years, but I'm afraid it might be a year or two, or 3. Let's go on. The U.S. military needs to hurry up and finish the KM deep state because a much bigger problem is looming. Japanese military intelligence sent me some very alarming information last week. They say that since the spring of 2024, here it is, the Chinese have infiltrated 800,000 People's Liberation Army soldiers armed with automatic rifles into Japan. The operatives landed in about 40 to 60 locations. Does that sound like what just happened across our southern border and northern border and maybe someplace else too? Yes, it does. They have selected a total of 135 targets, including the Prime Minister's office, the National Diet nuclear power plants, and oil refineries. That's what we've been talking about. We've been talking about these guys. Remember, Dmitry was told some of the people, the thing that starts the internal revolution is when people start fighting against the government. They start blowing up bridges and dams and doing all kinds of, explosions, and that's what he's talking about. So again, this is all part of massive arrests. This is all part of the big change. The devil lost, and he's mad. And we're glad, but the reason we're glad is we don't understand that he's mad. He's not going peacefully into the night someplace. He is about to wreak havoc. Let's go on. The sources add they were contacted recently by a man who says, a container, remember that word, a container, because we're going to tie that together with something here in just a second. A container sent to my company was so heavy that I opened it and found it to be a 10-ton truckload containing 3,000 automatic rifles, or what we would say is machine guns. Okay, that ain't for hunting deer, okay? That's for killing, in this case, Japanese. And I'm going to show you that they've probably done the same thing in America. Okay, a 10-ton truckload containing 3,000 automatic rifles. When I told my boss, he didn't tell the police, but called the Chinese consulate. The Chinese consulate came right away and took all the automatic rifles and machine guns. He told me to keep quiet. If this is true, the Chinese army secretly stationed outnumbers the 240,000 Japanese self-defense forces and 53,000 U.S. troops almost 3-1. Okay, so in the event that Russia attacks America, they know that Japan is going to come to our aid. And in the event that America is attacked about anything, they know that Japan is going to be on our side. So doesn't it make sense that they would pre-position men and weapons to counter that? Let's go on. To make things worse, the Chinese have sent thousands of beautiful women to seduce and marry members of the Japanese military. The sources say 10,000 regular troops, 6,000 Coast Guard troops, and 600 officers now have Chinese wives. And they say they're all sleeper agents and spies. Well, I'm glad we don't do that in America. Remember the congressman that just recently was accused of having a Chinese wife that was a spy? Remember? Okay. Now remember here, container. Okay, container filled with 3,000 automatic or machine guns. Let's go on. The Chinese military is also carrying out large-scale military exercises designed to blockade the island of Okinawa, where U.S. forces are stationed. The same sources are also reporting massive fights between Chinese dragons in Japan that the police are powerless to interfere in. We can confirm from our own Lotus Freemason contacts that some sort of secret proxy Chinese war is underway here in Japan. Well, we're sort of having the same thing. It's just that the news has not admitted it yet. Also, remember, Biden was bribed by the Chinese and almost certainly let an even larger number of Chinese and allied military-age males into the U.S. We have previously reported on large weapon stashes distributed around the U.S. for them to use. There it is, okay? Some of the people start fighting against the government. Chinese hardliners need to stage a war because, like the KM, they are in deep trouble and need a war to save their... Now, I removed that word because I had someone, one of our supporters, email me and say, I would really like it if you wouldn't say those words, even if they're on someone else's website. And I said, I think that's a good idea. So I think you know what he's saying. They're trying to save themselves. Now, let's talk about China prepositioning equipment with plans to attack America. And of course, the article also is talking about Japan and probably some of our other allies from within, truth be told. Now, you remember this one? This came from Dana Coverstone. And I can tell you right up front, I think some of the numbers here we don't know for certain what they are, but they may be giving us a date. If that's true, this may about be ready to be fulfilled. So it says, now he got this in 22. When the dream started, I was standing in the port of Los Angeles. There was a sign. In the shipping yard where the larger containers were being lifted off the ships, I saw 8 jet black containers sat on the ground about 15 feet apart, and they were pristine and clean with large Chinese letters in black on them as well. The letters were about 5 by 5 feet with a brown background that really stood out, almost like 3D on the containers. It was light outside, and I could also see a large clock tower. Here it comes. This is important. I'm going to tie together here in just a second. Stay with me. I could see a large clock tower that seemed to be about high above the shipping facility, and it was on exactly 3 o'clock. Okay. Now, do you think that's talking about a time or a date? I'll tell you, I think it's talking about a date. Okay, if it's talking about a date, is that the day of the month or is that the month of the year? I think it's probably talking about the month of the year. I think the Lord is trying to warn us here that in the 3rd month, January, February, March. Okay, hang on. Would that kind of fit? So January 20th, Trump is inaugurated, and I think after that, yes, there's going to be massive arrests, and yes, there's going to be a brief time of rejoicing, but you better understand it's going to be short-lived, and then holy hell is about to break loose. And it would fit that these kind of things start in the 3rd month of 2025. Stan, are you predicting that this is going to happen in March of 2025? No, God hadn't told me. I'm just like you. I'm doing my best to try to figure out the hints that God gives us. And this is just a hint. He's not telling us everything we want to know, but he's giving us a warning, a hint, something to pray against, which, by the way, if you join Fast Gap at prophecyclub.com, just go to prophecyclub.com, slide to the bottom, sign up. I never send product offers. I never ask for donations. This is only for people that want to fast and pray for their nation. Fast Gap is praying for the nation. Fast Track is praying for Prophecy Club. Okay, let's go on. So he sees a clock on exactly 3 o'clock, and all 8 doors of the containers begin to bang and shake violently. Suddenly the doors opened, and a man in military equipment rode out of the first container on a very large green dirt bike. It had leather saddlebags on both sides of the seat and very large knobby tires. Okay, what's he saying? He's saying that they're planning to go any place they want to, not just on the highways, but up the hills, down the roads, wherever they want to go. The helmet came off the head of the man on the motorcycle, and he stepped off the bike, but after putting the kickstand down. He was oriented and began screaming towards the trucks and pointing in different directions. He was very, very angry, and his face was very, very red, and suddenly checked his watch and put his helmet on and got back on the motorcycle and started it. The clock struck 4. Okay, is this saying that the containers arrive in March and things start happening in April? My guess, that's exactly what it's saying. Question is this coming in 25? Because we were watching for it in 24. We were watching for it in 23. We were watching for it in 22. Okay, just because it didn't happen in 22, 23, 24 doesn't mean the warning evaporated. It means is closer. Now, do you think with Trump in charge, this might be happening? Absolutely. Let's go on. The clock struck 4. There was a deep bell that rang, and the earth shook for a moment. Wait a minute. Could that be that New Madrid earthquake that Shane Warren warned us about? Could that be that happens before June the 1st of this year of 25 if we split Israel? Could that be that happens in the 4th month? Well, let's see. When is the counting of the Omer? Well, let's see, in November, in 25, I looked it up. It's from April 13th to June 1st. So could this be saying that in the 4th month, in April, that's when the earthquake hits? Stan, you're jumping to conclusions here. I'm doing my best to try to understand. Let's keep going. Then out of each container came about 25 soldiers on the same kind of motorcycles with saddlebags and AK-47s. That's a machine gun. AK-47s on their back. At this point, I could see RPGs and lots of ammo and weapons in those saddlebags. And when the first soldier took off out of the port, the rest of them followed and went in different directions once they were outside the fence line, meaning got 25 different people, 25 different locations, with AK-47s, RPGs, lots of ammo, and you better know that there's explosives there too. What are they doing? Well, apparently, right in the middle of a New Madrid earthquake, we get hit with this too. Part of taking down a sinful nation that's walked away from Jesus. Let's go on. He said, then the scene changed. I was hearing news reports and seeing newspaper headlines with serious-faced reporters announcing deaths all over the country in both rural and metropolitan areas. What? The reports were all about water systems being poisoned. Remember, I just read the other day about how they had been poisoning the waters. Okay, we've talked about poison waters a lot. Okay, we're talking about poison that you can boil the water. Now, if it's a virus or if it's a bacteria, you can boil it and the water's safe to drink. But if it's a poison, you can boil it all day long. It's not taking away the poison. It's still deadly and it'll still kill you. This is probably a poison, and that's what it says here. The reports were all about water systems being poisoned in various areas around the country. How many areas? 25 different areas. He says, then I saw headlines. Entire communities poisoned through water supply. So try to get this. So Trump gets in January 20th. Then in March, the Chinese arrive with poison and motorcycles and AK-47s and explosives, start blowing things up and poisoning things. Does that sound about right? As in March and April time? Right smack dab in the middle of a New Madrid earthquake? No, wait a minute. God has not told me this is what's going to happen. He's not told me when it's going to happen. But if you got a brain between your ears, you could probably say, you know what? This is very, very probable, okay? That's what we're talking about. Reporters were telling people to drink nothing but bottled water, or water they knew was not connected to the local water supply, the city water supply. It was affecting both larger and smaller communities, but not every community. It was impacting the West more so than other places in the U.S., according to the reporters, and they were announcing that they were National Guard units fully armed. Wait a minute. Why would National Guard units be fully armed going to watch for water facilities unless there were Chinese people on motorcycles with AK-47s that they had to fight? In other words, this is a foreign entity on a motorcycle with an AK-47 purposely poisoning us, right? Let's go on. National Guard fully armed, watching water facilities. Thousands were reported as having died, and hospitals were full of heavily poisoned people getting medical treatment, and FEMA centers were being set up in those regions. An emergency broadcast announcement was running along the bottom of the TV screens and monitors stating that the boiling water was not an effective way of making any water safe. No, it's poisoned, okay? And then I saw a clock. Here it is. Look close. Then I saw a clock tower above a municipal water supply, and its hands pointed to 4:05 in the afternoon. Okay, what's the 05? Well, if 4 is April, 5 could be the 5th day of April, or it could be just early part of April. But it's not talking about June. Okay, let's go on. And I put this here to remind you. If you do not have a water filter, we do have Alexa Pure in stock, and we can ship right now today. You can go to prophecyclub.com. I recommend you have one. If you do not have a water filter, then what are you going to do? What are you going to do when your daughter starts getting sick and you didn't have one? What are you going to do? Even if it's a neighbor and you didn't have a water filter. And the way it's going to hit is it's not a here and a there person. It's going to be a whole block of people or it's going to be a whole city water system that gets poisoned. In other words, all the people around you got to have a water filter. Let's go on, though. I saw 4 lines of lights that seemed to be coming from the border that reminded me of a video of the Ho Chi Minh Trail. It seemed that many people were coming from the border, but in a very organized way. Okay, now wait a minute, Stan. This already happened. Yes, but could it happen again? But for a reason, hang on. They moved north hundreds of miles from California to Texas with the lights bright enough to be seen from space. They all stopped moving at once. When they did, smaller light trails from within the U.S. started moving towards the big light where the movement had stopped. You remember Leslie had the dream of 4 hurricanes hitting Mexico, just back to back to back to back, and they were coming out of Mexico so hard and fast that they were going the wrong way down the interstates. And of course, people had to just pull over because they were pouring. Remember? Okay, so don't think this is past. Don't think we've missed this yet. Let's go on. It was like watching moths drawn to a flame, and the source light kept getting bigger and bigger, and then it flashed once all the smaller lights were attached. It went dark for a few moments, then pulsed, then exploded, and the light was spread and hundreds of miles beyond the source of the explosion. So whatever it is, the people run in all directions. The clock showed 4:10. Small embers of flames were coming down around the clock, but not catching the ground on fire, although it looked like it should have. Okay, so what's going on? Well, in this part, we might not be certain. So let's just park it, keep it on the shelf for a minute. Let's keep going. There was sudden silence that permeated the atmosphere, and I then saw the clock strike 4:15, and there seemed to be an alarm going off across the nation. In other words, we're in a lot of trouble. Then the scene changed. I saw churches of all shapes and sizes, which are surrounded by mobs of people who were screaming. They chanted hostile threats, but were staying some distance away from each church, about 150 feet. Inside the churches, I could hear people leading others in prayer, but their prayers had no power or authority. Why? Because they don't know the word. Okay, they don't have the word in here. They don't know who they are in Christ. And the crowds kept surging. Suddenly, in at least 5 locations, I saw arrows fired into the crowd from the roof of the churches. Each of these arrows scattered the hostile crowd as they impacted only the pavement, and the protesters fled. As I watched the people scrambling, I noticed that there was an archer on each of these church roofs, and it appeared to be the very same man that would be the angel that comes to him, the very same man firing the arrows in each direction at precisely the same time. The alarm had been going off from the clock during this entire time, and it stopped as the man began walking towards me. It was the man I always see in the dreams, and he had a quiver full of sheer white arrows with extremely sharp points over his shoulder. From over his back, he pulled a very large, long bow and put the bottom of it on the ground. He stood silent for a few moments, surveying the area, but then turned to me and said, "There must be precision in your prayers." In other words, no more general prayers. They've got to be very, very specific. And by the way, since he said this, I have tried to make my prayers even more specific. There must be precision in your prayers from this point forward, absolute precision to counter the noise and the violence that will be aimed at the body of Christ. The church must remember that it is not by might, not by power, but by my Spirit that will help you to walk straight through the battle. There must be precision and power in your prayers. There must be. I don't think this has already happened. I think this is still talking to us, and I think that there's a high possibility we're only a few months away from this happening. This may come to pass this year. The war has arrived. Okay, what about that phrase? So Trump is about to get inaugurated. He's been certified. Monday week is January 20th. The war has arrived. The war between light and darkness. And Trump is doing his best on his side, but you better understand that there's some Chinese people on 25 motorcycles with AK-47 and blowers, and there's got poison, and it's coming. If we can receive it, God has warned us. Let's go on. The war has arrived, and those awake are on the front lines now, and you will never be able to get away from that line. Absolute precision is required in your prayers. After saying this, he quickly put an arrow into the bow and shot it straight up in the air, and the arrow never came back down. But he kept looking into the air where he shot it, and he never looked back at me. Remember to be precise, as it matters more than ever right now. He disappeared before my eyes. The scene changed. I saw people watching TV monitors in airports and in homes who were covering their mouths in horror at what they saw. It was summer as the grass was browning from the heat. It was on the screens of every TV. People were crying and embracing each other and screaming in shock. If you're out and about and all of a sudden you need gasoline, you need food, and the credit cards aren't working, they aren't taking dollars, then one of the best things to have is right here. It's a prepper bar. Each one of these is a little bit bigger than a credit card. Will fit in your purse or your billfold, and it breaks into various pieces. So you could give them part instead of maybe more silver, more gold than you need to. Carry it right in your billfold or your purse. This particular one is 5 bars. You don't necessarily need to carry 5 bars with you, but you call 844-771-1776 or prophecyclubbar.com. prophecyclubbar.com. 844-771-1776.